Hi, everyone. We have a quick COVID update, and then I'm going to hand it over to the chief. We're up to 3,438 cases and 114 fatalities across the entire time of the COVID crisis. We're continuing to see our cases increase in New Haven and the region. And that's obviously very concerning. Similar to what folks are hearing in many other parts of the US, a lot of the spread, we believe, is through small family and friend gatherings where people aren't as cautious as they should be. And just want to note that if people do feel the need to see family or friends in small groups, they should be doing so outside with masks and continue to do social distancing. There's some indication that carpools is another way that people have been getting COVID. Even though there are not super spreader events, the significant increase in cases in the region shows that we've got to be very careful about the actions that we all take. Director Bond, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you. In addition to that, while Connecticut, the city of New Haven remains in the yellow category, which is the intent that we're averaging about 5 to 9 cases per 100,000 per the Connecticut Department of Public Health threshold. The framework that we need to keep in mind are a couple of things. Number one, there are some data gaps that still exist, which are about 2 laboratories, Broad Institute Lab, which is the connection of the Yale University Lab, as well as Docs Urgent Care, who are encountering reporting issues to the State Department of Health. When that occurs, that causes us to have a lag in being able to have our data, which does not depict an accurate picture of where our cases may be. So for example, as I indicated, it may say that we're in the yellow when in reality we may be in the moderate or high risk. And so it's really important that we follow the precautions and remain vigilant. The State Health Department does not have consistent data of the docs into the CTE-DSS system, which is a surveillance system that we use, until these issues are rectified and cleared up. And so it's really important that we really take the proper precautions. As we do contact tracing, we are finding that a lot of the cases have to do with a lot of social gatherings, not using the mask correctly, and spending prolonged period of time with even coworkers. And so with that, I just want to make sure that I raise that our data is provisional and cases may be higher than what we are reporting due to those factors.
And we've highlighted that to the state, and they're working through those issues because we obviously need to have an accurate assessment of what's going on in the region. I want to turn it over to Chief Reyes. The chief and his team have done a review of the protests that happened outside of City Hall months back, where the protesters, some of the protesters tried to enter the building, and some of the officers used pepper spray to push them back. The chief and his team has spent a lot of time on this investigation, and I'm going to turn it over to him to talk about the results of this investigation. And I'm sorry, I said outside City Hall, I meant outside the police station.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am accompanied by my team, Assistant Chief Renee Dominguez, head of the Patrol Division, and Captain Duff, our Public Information Officer. And we're here to announce to you that we have concluded our investigation and our review of the incident, as the mayor said, that occurred on May 31st in front of police headquarters. It was a protest following the death of George Floyd in Minnesota. Like many other cities, we saw protests that followed that incident. And this was the very next weekend after that incident occurred. It was a Sunday, and the protesters came to the police department. There were several hundred protesters outside of the police department. And at one point during the interaction with the protesters attempted to force their way inside the police department. We have brought some footage that we want to show you. But I just wanted to say before I show you the footage that we have reviewed every aspect of this incident. It is our intent and our primary responsibility to protect everyone's rights, including people that may protest against us. And we pride ourselves in being a professional department and one department that respects everyone's right to protest. We were fully prepared to do exactly that Sunday. We had developed some information that this particular group had been in Bridgeport the Saturday before. And so part of our response to this incident was based on information that we learned that occurred in front of the Bridgeport Police Department the night before. Many of the protesters that participated in the protest in front of the police department had gone to the Bridgeport Police Department. They had forced their way in, and they had vandalized officer memorials and vandalized the police department's lobby area. Our police department at the time there was no way to secure it. This was the height of COVID. And so we put a plan together to put a line of police officers to clearly inform the protesters that while they could stay out in front of the police department, they could not enter the police department, both for COVID concerns and obviously because we could not allow that many people it would be a security risk to allow that many people to enter the police department. We had officers in plain uniform in front of the police department. And at one point, the officers you're going to see began to tell people to stay back. They began to, the organizer of the event made an announcement you're going to hear on the video that the police department was a public building and that we had no right to allow them in. At that point, they made an overt effort and forcibly attempted to gain entry into the department by pushing themselves through the line of police officers. At that point, police officers, the ones that were in front, withdrew their pepper spray and they sprayed into the group and they pushed them back. They were able to successfully get the group to retreat. At that point, we went to our second layer, our second sort of layer of protection, which was our officers in protective equipment and riot gear. These officers were equipped with masks, they were equipped with shields, and so they took over the front line to prevent the protesters from entering the building. That is the extent of the incident. Fortunately, no one was seriously hurt. Again, we do not take lightly the use of force against anyone, certainly not against people that are protesting, and it was not our desire to use of force. That said, the use of pepper spray was evaluated. The entire incident was evaluated. There were hundreds, as I said, if not thousands of hours of video that the Internal Affairs Division poured through, and to make sure that every action that was taken that afternoon was consistent with the values of the New Haven Police Department. But what I can report after reviewing that investigation is that every officer involved in that protest that day acted within the color of the law. They were professional, and their behavior was consistent with the expectations of the New Haven Police Department. Therefore, no officers were disciplined as a result of this incident. I will say that the investigation remains, the incident does remain under investigation. We do anticipate there may be an arrest associated with an individual that threw a projectile at the officers. I do want to say that I failed to include that during the attempt to enter the building, officers were met with projectiles being thrown at them, to include bottles of liquid and batteries. One of our officers, supervisor, was struck in the face and did sustain an injury to the face, did not require medical attention, and did not require to be hospitalized. And that was the extent of the injuries. I'm going to show you a clip of the video that pretty much encapsulates the preceding events leading up to the use of force. You'll see the use of pepper spray, and then you'll see us sort of take an additional stance with riot gear officers to protect entry into the building.
not do it.
Not even push it. Not even push it. Hey!
Sticks out, sticks out, sticks out. Back up. Mayor Elicker! Mayor Elicker! Back up! Mayor Elicker! Mayor Elicker!
Captain Duff, I'll have you play the other video as well, please.
Yes, sir. Just give me a moment to pull it up.
In this particular video, I want you to listen for some of the comments by one of the organizers, where you hear them saying, as I mentioned earlier, that they were going to make their way in, that we could not stop them from going into a public building, and then at that point you see the group force their way in. You're also going to hear officers tell them not to do it.
Sticks out! Sticks out! Sticks out! Sticks out! Sticks out! Hold the line! Hold the line! Come on, come on. Come on. We standing. We standing right here. Let's go.
Okay.
Heads up.
Captain Duff, that's enough. So we had that wasn't the video, but nonetheless.
Yes, there's one more, Chief.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we'll do is, in the interest of time, we're going to make these videos available to all the media. And I'm more interested in taking questions and answering any questions you may have. I just want to sort of finish by saying that this was one of the first protests of many that we saw here in the city. And while we were absolutely justified in the use of force, we evaluated this incident. And one of the things that we did was we provided security measures within the police department. We locking mechanisms on the door, because we recognized that the best course of action, as we looked at this incident, was to minimize the use of force altogether by not having a presence there. In subsequent protests, we took a different approach. We did not have a large presence of police. We locked the doors. We had a plan of action. We were ready for an escalating event, but we wanted to sort of learn from these protests, that this was something that was being dealt with around the country, that these were unprecedented times. And so I think we were able to learn some lessons from this particular incident and apply them to future protests. I'm happy to say that in the following protests, we were able to organize with many and coordinate with many of the protesters, and we had very successful outcomes. Not the least of which was the large protest in front of the police department of more than 5,000 people that protested for hours in front of the department. People exercised their free speech. We were there as assistant chiefs to represent the department, but there was no use of force. There was no show of force. And we were very happy with the way our officers have comported themselves, not just in this incident, just in all of the protests that we've had. I think that the citizens of New Haven can be proud of their police department and the way that they've handled these protests. We've learned a great deal, but we've engaged also with our community to be able to have the best outcomes possible. So in summation, I just want to say thank you to the Internal Affairs Division and everyone that, in particular to Lieutenant Zanelli and his crew, for the hours and hours of work that they did into this investigation to make sure that we were transparent, to make sure that we looked at absolutely everything. And I want to say thank you to the New Haven Police Department for their professionalism and for the way that they've carried themselves throughout such a very difficult time in our country. I'll open it up to any questions. Mayor,
I just want to add before we open up to questions, Chief, if I may, that I've learned a lot over the past 6 or so months about engagement as well, and I think that one of the most important things I've learned is just how important it is for me to be present everywhere I possibly can as mayor. And I've certainly worked very hard to do that, but there's been a moment like this where a different approach by myself and engaging the protest very early on, I think could have helped decrease some of the volatility. And certainly since this incident, I think that our whole team has approached the protest very, very differently. Hindsight is 20/20, and given what we knew at the moment and what we were seeing in other cities, I think that we were all very concerned about what could have happened. But I also think that the change in our approach and engagement by myself and lack of engagement, direct engagement by the police has shown a much more successful outcome for the protests. And that's been a good thing, I think, for everyone involved, not just the police department, but of course the protesters and the message that they want to get across as well. Any questions? Go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you very much, Chief, for the presentation. A few follow-up questions for you, Chief. First, how many officers deployed pepper spray that day? Was it 1, 2, multiple, a dozen? How many people sprayed pepper spray?
It was definitely under a dozen, but it was multiple officers. We couldn't determine the exact number of officers that deployed pepper spray, but it was, for the most part, it was the officers that were on the front lines.
And again, do you have a sense of how many different officers' body camera footage did you review for this months-long investigation?
So we reviewed the body cam footage of every officer that was deployed that day to make sure that there wasn't anything that we missed. And that's why the investigation took so long. It was an investigation that spanned 4 months, but there were just literally scouring through hours and hours and hundreds of hours of video that our internal affair folks did, because we wanted to make sure we had an accurate picture of every angle. And then we also wanted to make sure that aside from, remember that was a long day. It was over 10 hours that we were out there. It's also part of what we learned, and just in reference to what the mayor said, one of the things that I evaluated as the chief of police is that having my officers out there for that long of a time really subjected them to a lot of abuse. It was exhausting. It was, again, we looked at it and we reevaluated, and we were able to make changes that put our officers in a better position, put our department and our city in a better position. And we were happy with the following. The other thing that I forgot to say is that, and I think you reported this or the Independent did, that we were getting information. There was an individual within the crowd that had a large knife. We knew that there were people within the crowd that we were concerned had nefarious intent. But I also want to say that there were many people within the crowd that did not. And unfortunately, we were dealing with a mixture of people that were there to cause chaos and people there that were just wanting to express their feelings about what was going on in the country.
And did you review just body camera footage or some of the other citizen or reporter made video for your review? I know we did a couple of Facebook Live videos. I imagine other people did too. Did you look at those in your investigation?
Yeah, we looked at everything that was available to us. We also had some other, we had also some people that were that were looking and evaluating the incident. So, I mean, we interviewed people, we reviewed video. It was a comprehensive investigation that just didn't entail the review of video, but obviously that was the lion's share.
And were you able to determine, did the throwing of projectiles like water bottles and batteries, did that come before the use of pepper spray or after the use of pepper spray?
Yes, it came before and then it followed as well. So the use of the throwing of the water bottles and the battery preceded the pepper spray.
And you said that one officer was hit in the face and suffered an injury that didn't require hospitalization. Did you follow up? Did any of the protesters suffer injuries, either significant or not, from the use of pepper spray?
So people obviously suffered and obviously suffered from the pepper spray, but nobody reported long-term injury. Nobody sought medical attention, and nobody sustained any physical injury beyond the pepper spray.
And if I may,
To the police department's knowledge.
Oh,
or no,
what was that?
No one reported anything yet.
And if I may squeeze one more in, and then
do one more, and then we'll bring it over to Brian, and then we can come back to you.
My last for now is, Chief, you said that you're considering making an arrest of someone involved in that day's incident. Is that a New Haven resident that you are anticipating potentially making an arrest of, or is it someone not from New Haven?
Yeah, so I don't want to give any details about that, but the decision will happen in the very near future. So it is something we expect a decision on very shortly.
Thank you.
Brian, go ahead.
Yes, my question is, what recourse could protesters seek if they wanted to challenge that? I know that the CRB is not fully set, doesn't have its membership full yet.
Well, and typically a citizen can make a complaint. Obviously, that's what typically leads to a chief lodging an internal investigation. In this particular case, just the fact that there was a use of force led to me ordering an internal affairs investigation. And so if a citizen is not satisfied with that, they can certainly contest or challenge the findings. I'm sure they have a legal recourse to do that. They could, I mean, pretty much it would be legal recourse if they wanted to.
And Brian, just to clarify, so the Civilian Review Board, all the necessary members have been appointed. The body has not begun to meet. And so I just want to clarify, because you said that it sounded like you were saying that it didn't have all of its members yet.
I know that the chief said that, when you were talking about officers being subjected to abuse, that protesters were, threatening their lives and their children. I didn't hear or see any of that on the video, and I was told the video that would be made available. Is there video of that?
Yeah, so there'll be, like I said, there's going to be a lot of video footage that'll be available to the press and to the public. We've made, I think we've made a set number of copies, and then the rest of it will be by request, but we've made enough for the press. So you're welcome to go through that, but yes, the video does show the officers being threatened, various different things being said to the officers that they were subjected to. Yes.
Is there a reason no one's face was redacted in that footage?
Is there a reason what?
Why no one's face was redacted from the footage?
No. No.
All right, and just while I have the airtime, I'd also like to ask the mayor. It was discussed that carpooling is something that might facilitate the spread of COVID-19. I know that with schools returning, there's going to be buses and transportation. Has there been a consideration for how that might go?
I mean, this is nothing different than what's been discussed at many board meetings about students being sitting far away from each other on the buses, and having a very clear plan for how students get on and off the bus so they don't have to pass each other when they get on and off the bus. It's different than people sitting, say, in a back seat where there's 3 people sitting directly next to each other.
And I think my last question for at least this round is, has there been any consideration from the police department on election day safety? God forbid there's a threat or something in the city of New Haven.
Yeah, thank you for that question. Yes, we've been meeting. We're going to be meeting with our counterparts throughout the city. We've already had discussions on this with the mayor. We'll be working with election officials. People should know that the police will be out there to ensure that the public is safe. We are in contact with our federal partners as well, monitoring any potential threats that might arise, anything that they may hear. So we're communicating through our normal channels. We're doing intelligence gathering, but more importantly, we're just going to have the resources out there to make sure that everybody has a safe election day. So as of right now, we don't anticipate that there is any threat or there are any concerns. People, again, should know that you're going to see police officers out there. They're there to ensure everyone's safety and to protect everyone's right to vote. So we encourage people to come out.
Thanks, Brian. I'm going to go to Dave now.
Thanks, Mayor. My question is simply just how is the media going to get this video? Is it going to be how is it going to be sent to us?
So we have hard copies that you can coordinate with Captain Duff, and we actually have hard copies ready to give you. We also have the police report that was done by the supervisor for the incident. We're also making that available to you as well. So you'll have the police report and you'll have a hard copy from us.
Thank you.
Tom?
Thank you. I was going to ask the same as Dave, but so it sounds like media will have to swing by 1 Union Avenue, Chief, to pick up hard copies of the reports and the video. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, or coordinate with Captain Duff.
Mm-hmm. And then, Chief, you mentioned a concern about a group of protesters entering the Bridgeport Police Department the night before and vandalizing some of the department. And you said a group that was in Bridgeport also showed up in New Haven. As you said, there were hundreds of people outside of New Haven's police headquarters on May 31st. How big was that group from Bridgeport that you think was also in New Haven, and why did you think that they might want to vandalize the New Haven police or do something illegal in the New Haven police department?
So we had presence in Bridgeport. Obviously, when we heard about what was happening there, we had presence there ourselves. So this is direct knowledge that we had. And we also were protesters there after they were thrown out of the police department, after they had to get forcibly taken out of the police department. They were commenting, let's go to New Haven, let's go to New Haven Police Department, NHPD is next, that kind of stuff. So we knew specifically that their intent was to come to the New Haven Police Department. And if you see in that video, we weren't able to show you the clip, but it'll be part of the clips that we show you. The organizer, in spite of our repeated notification that the police department was closed due to COVID and they could not come in, was intent on telling that group to force their way in. They were forcing their way in as a group to go into the police department. That's what precipitated the use of force. Until that point, we were there in plain uniform, ready to just allow people to protest. But we, in fact, knew that their intention was to make it inside. There is no question. Had they made it into the lobby, they would have vandalized our just the same way that they did in Bridgeport. So it was actionable information and also their actions at the scene that had led us to that conclusion.
And my last question for you, thank you for that. And the answer could be both, but are you saying that the building was closed because of COVID-related concerns or because you were concerned they were going to vandalize the building, or both?
Yeah, both. I mean, the biggest thing is that, you know, they wanted to come in, and their sense was that this is a public building, we should be able to come in. Well, first and foremost, it was the height of COVID, public buildings were closed. But secondly, the reason the heavy police presence was there is because we were concerned that they had nefarious intent, which was evidenced by their attempt to force their way into the building.
I think, just to add to that, I think it's one of the challenging situations. One of the challenging things is that there were, of the 1,000+ people that were there, hundreds and hundreds of people that were there to protest for Black Lives Matter, and it's hard to be able to ensure that if there are potentially some individuals that want to choose to do the wrong thing, how does one respond to that and make sure that everyone keeps safe, while at the same time ensuring that the overwhelming majority of people that are there have their voices heard in a positive way?
Thank you.
Any other questions from folks? Mary?
I just have a question about that and on how many people might be charged. You spoke specifically about an organizer, and there was pretty clear there were some people that were organizers, and others, I guess, through projectiles. So is it more than one person that may be charged in this incident?
At this point, Mary, we've presented a warrant to the state's attorney's office for one individual.
One individual. Okay.
Correct.
All right.
And it was not an organizer, I can tell you that.
Okay.
It was an individual that was throwing projectiles.
Okay.
That we were able to identify.
All right. And the other questions I have is just on the election. And I don't know if this will happen in New Haven or in Connecticut, but people that legally can carry firearms, I mean, how far do people have to stand away from the polls? I mean, how do you deal with that, that kind of intimidation at the polls?
So are you saying people standing around with firearms to intimidate people? I'm not sure exactly what the context.
Yeah, I mean, I guess people do have the right to carry firearms, and when I understand, I've seen other instances of protests, particularly at the state capitol, where people come armed. How close can people get to the polls if that's, you know, their intent to bring their weapons?
Yeah. So if someone has an open carry, and you know that this, you know, Connecticut is an open carry state, you can carry a weapon. I mean, it's highly encouraged that people conceal their weapons, but if someone's there and we know that they have a handgun, you know, we're not going to allow them inside of a public building, especially most of the public buildings that the polls are at. You're not allowed to carry handguns in there. But in terms of how close they are, I mean, it'll be a case-by-case situation. I don't think that's going to be an issue, Mary. But if someone's out there and people feel threatened, or if they're out there just standing around showing their weapon in a way that's intimidating to others, and we're going to handle that, accordingly. But I don't think that's something that we should be concerned about.
I mean, I guess it's our city buildings. I know City Hall is posted that you can't come in with a weapon. Is it all city buildings, all schools?
Schools, you can't come into any schools with a weapon. You can't come into City Hall. You can't come into the police department with a weapon. Most city buildings, you're prohibited from carrying weapons, if not all of them.
Okay, so that level of concern is really not something you're worried about.
No, we're not. I mean, it's not, again, we don't take anything for granted. We'll be out there. We'll be taking appropriate action if we see that someone is, and again, if we can deem that someone is attempting to intimidate voters, that's illegal. Just attempting to do that is illegal. So whether or not they're in possession of handguns, obviously, if we see someone with a handgun, we'll take appropriate action to make sure that they can carry them legally and to make sure that they're not causing alarm to anyone that's there to exercise the right to vote.
Right. So will you be around all the polls, or is it just an increased maybe presence of police throughout the city on election day?
So we will have officers assigned to every poll. And that doesn't mean that they'll be there, but there are officers expressly assigned. Part of their assignment that day will be to drive through the polls periodically and be out there. We will also have supervisors that will be doing the same. Each polling place will have a point of contact for the police department. So we typically, this is what we do for all of them. We are expecting a higher than normal voter turnout this year. And so to that extent, we will have more of a presence, but you won't see necessarily a persistent presence of policing there. But we will be omnipresent.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I see Tom has another question.
That was just a leftover raised hand from earlier. I'm good.
Oh,
Thanks.
really? Right. Anything else? All right. Thanks, everyone. Good to see you all. Take care.
Thank you.